Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today, as you can see, we've got a Hi-Point, but this one is a little bit unique. It's the model 1095, chambered in 10mm. That is really cool, a 10mm pistol caliber carbine. Now Hi-Points do get picked on a lot by a number of different people, but the carbines are generally well received. They do seem to get some decent respect, and they do earn it. They do work. This one's not an exception to that. We've had no trouble with this thing working. The only thing we did find with it is you don't want to be gentle with it. When you go to chamber a round, do it like you mean it. If you try to be real gentle and smooth with it, it'll have a tendency to hang up. But once you get the round chambered, we had no malfunctions, no stovepipes, nothing. It just worked. Now, talking about this thing, it's pretty much the same as any of the other Hi-Point carbines. It has a 17.5-inch barrel with a post-front sight. And notice it's got a Picatinny rail under the barrel, and it's also got a Picatinny rail on the top. And then it comes with this sight mechanism, which has an adjustable peep sight. And this sight is removable. I'm also thinking about putting a red dot on it. So I'll take this sight assembly off and put a red dot on it. That's a lot easier for me to see. I don't see peep sights really well to begin with. But the interesting thing is that it does come with this fully adjustable sight with protection around it. So if you were out hunting or something like that, you're not going to have to worry about smashing your sight on something. It's an inexpensive rifle. The MSRP on this, it goes from $389 for the one you see here up to $445 for the flat dark earth, and there's actually a Realtree camo version of it as well. But you can routinely on the market get them in the $300 to $350 territory. So they're not very expensive. They come with a 10mm magazine. It's a single stack. I'm sorry, it comes with a 10-round 10mm single stack magazine. And one thing I did neglect to do that we usually try to do right up front, I'll do it now that I've thought of it, is we do have an empty chamber. Now this is blowback, which is a little bit unusual. Not for the Hi-Points. The Hi-Points are all blowback, but in general you don't find blowback 10mm. I don't know how well this would perform with some of the nastiest high-end top caliber 10mm, but everything that we fed it worked fine, and we used a lot of the Armscore ammo, which is kind of actually hot. It's not the hottest. It's not like Underwood and Buffalo Bore, but it's not basically rebadged 40. And one thing too that's kind of unique that just came into field is it comes with a threaded barrel, 5.7 by 28, so you can put a muzzle device on it or a suppressor. So it might be interesting to put our Osprey on this and see how well it works. And I realized after I said it, I must have 5.7 on the mind. It's 57 by 28, 0.57 by 28. So it is one of the standard threadings. It's got a very nice handguard. It does have a rail underneath the handguard. It's a polymer rail, and it's beveled at the edges. So when you're holding it, it doesn't bite into your hand. I didn't feel the need to put covers on this like you sometimes have to do on these rails when they're on the bottom. It was comfortable to hold, but if you wanted to put a forward grip on it or an angle grip on it, you could easily do that. The rail at the top is attached to the dust cover, and this clamp holds it to the rest of the body to keep it stable. But I would say that if you're going to put an optic on this, you'd probably want to have it from this break point here back to make sure that the mounting place is real stable. And this right here, this section where the sight is probably the most stable section of the rail for ensuring that you keep zero when you take it apart and put it back together. The dust cover does go on with 2 pins. So the dust cover is going to stay in place and it's going to return to the same exact spot, unlike an AK-47 where it just kind of sits on there and can wiggle around. This dust cover, once it's back in place, is going to stay right where it is. Another interesting feature of this rifle is the back end. So it's got a rubber butt plate, but it's also got a piston system. There's springs. And it absorbs recoil real well. You can see when I squeeze it. Now, it's a 7-pound gun. So a 7-pound gun shooting 10mm is going to have very little recoil to begin with. When you add this rubberized back plate, it's actually kind of like a plasticky rubber, and the springs, it's very, very comfortable and almost no recoil. And then you've got this rubber cheek pad. Now the only thing that we found about this is when I first took the plastic protection off it, it was really sticky and gooey. And then after it sat for a day or so, it kind of hardened up. So one of the things I would suggest, and I don't know if that's an anomaly for mine or if that's just the butyl rubber that they're using, I would pull the protection off it and let it sit out before you take it out into the field, so that you don't get, we got a little bit of stuff on it that got on it. I'll get that off later with some masking tape. But pull the protection off and let this thing set up. One of the things we found is that it was easy to pull tight groups with it, even with that peep sight. Even though I don't really see peep sights as well as many others, it did work well. It pulled nice groups. This would be useful for hunting. In 10mm caliber can take down a hog or any of the other things that you might be after. And from a fun day at the range, this thing was just loads of fun. Take this, a Glock 29, and just have a blast. So let me set this thing down and I'll get the red dot and show you the red dot that I'm going to put on it. What I've got is a Burris Fastfire 3, which I've got right here. It's kind of a micro red dot. These things are useful on pistols and rifles. And I know on a rifle I could put a much larger one on there, there's room for it. But I kind of like these. I've got this on my Glock 40, I've got this at an angle mount on my Tavor for hunting. And overall, they're just really cool optics. Now this one you'll see looks like it's Picatinny only. It's actually not. That's the red dot. So it'll go on multiple different adapter plates, and the kit that I bought happens to come with the Picatinny adapter. So at that point you can buy this, put it on an optic ready gun that has the various different plates, like the Glock MOS, the new PPQ steel frame, etc., etc. Or with this little low profile base plate, you can put it on any Picatinny rail. So I'm going to put one of these things in. We'll do a follow-up on how that works. But overall, I think it's going to work well on this rifle. And yeah, I know I spent $250 on an optic to put on a $300 rifle, but it's going to make it a lot easier to shoot for me and a lot more fun. So overall, I think it's going to be worth it. As you can see, it's just a nice rifle, and at that price you really can't go wrong with it. They've got a lifetime warranty, no questions asked, they'll fix it. So I'm not really worried about having any kind of an issue with this that won't get taken care of. They do have a good reputation. So now that we've gone through, showed you the various features of it, let's actually take this thing apart. And this is where it does get a little bit different. And I know I do pick on various guns for having weird takedown procedures. I'll give the Hi-Points a little bit of latitude because of the price point, but there still are some things that I just wish they wouldn't do the way they did. So to take this thing apart, it's multiple steps. You have to remove the charging handle, and that's not unusual other than you need a wrench to remove it. It's just a regular hex bolt. So I've got this 5/16 inch wrench, and I'm going to use that to remove the charging handle. And you notice it was easy to do. I didn't torque this thing in there for life. I just torqued it down enough that it won't back itself out. And that'll be important when you go to put it back together. Don't over torque it, because it does have to come out. So there you got the bolt comes out. And the next thing you got to do is there's a spring clip here. There'll be another spring clip inside. There's a flip clip right here. And then there's two little right up front and back that you have to pop out. Now, most of these you can do without needing to use a tool other than something that's made out of plastic to push it. So to get these out, you push in on this. It's kind of spring-loaded. You push in on it, and then it allows you to flip this forward. They can be a little sticky, so you may need to actually grab them with something and pull them. And I'm using something that's made out of polymer. I'm going to have to set this, I'm going to have to turn this so that I can get some torque on it and get this thing moved. So it's going to take a little bit to get this. And you have to kind of push in on it and flip it. There it goes. So you saw it flipped. And I'm using polymer tools. That little was just a rub there. Now the back one I found tends to be a little more cooperative. Of course it won't be now because I'm trying to do this on camera. But again, you push in on it. And it doesn't really give you, there it goes, it doesn't give a lot of clearance. So it's real difficult to get it to flip. Once those flip, the pins come right out. I got one right here, and the one at the front, which I'll grab a hold of and pull out. So now I have the two pins out. I'm going to set these down on a mat that I've got down here so I don't get too much oil on this pad. So those come out. This little front piece flips up. And there's a little cutout in it you can use to flip it up. And then this has to come off. which the good news is you can put something behind it that's made out of polymer and push it forward. That'll get it started, and then you can just pull it out. So once you've done all of that, the front rail should actually just separate. Hang on a second, let me take a look and make sure I didn't miss anything. There it goes. So the front rail piece comes off on the top. Then the dust cover comes off. So now you can see the bolt. But in order to get the bolt out, I have to actually pull the rifle assembly out of the stock. And so it just kind of rocks up and out. So now I have basically the rifle minus the stock. The last one is this one. This one's a pain. I have not found a way to move this without using pliers. So this spring clip right here is real tight, and I have not found a way to get it without pliers. You can see some of the scratches. I'm not as worried about these scratches. The Zymac won't corrode, and this is a part of the rifle that's not visible. So I'm just going to use an inexpensive slip joint pliers, get it in front of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get the one jaw in front of it and the other jaw on this protrusion so that it doesn't block it, and then I'm just going to give it a squeeze. It pops back. At this point, I can now take the bolt off by bringing it all the way back, lifting it up, and then letting it slide forward. And one thing I had forgotten to do is you have to remove this little clip. What that clip does is it stabilizes the barrel. And now I have separated it. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention on this, in order to remove the upper bolt, basically what is the bolt, which is this entire upper cover, you would have to take the front post off. So you can do everything with it just like this. It'll tilt up about that far. You do want to remove the recoil spring before you start getting around and cleaning because you don't want to bend it. But if you keep this up close to the body of the rifle, any scratches it may put on the barrel won't be visible, and you just got to be careful with it. But at this point you can see, if I flip it over, if you've had a Hi-Point pistol, you'll recognize this. Basically, this is the internal mechanics of a Hi-Point pistol. And on a Hi-Point pistol, this whole assembly is basically your slide. So effectively, they've built a Hi-Point pistol into a rifle. This little protrusion here holds the firing pin in place, and you'll see there's the firing pin in here. And if I reach in there with a pick, I can slide it out. There's a dual recoil spring right here, inner and outer, and then the firing pin itself is right here. And this is the same as in their pistols. And I would recommend cleaning the firing pin channel every time you clean it, because being a blowback gun, it does get dirty in there, but keep in mind you don't want to oil the firing pin channel. And to put it back together, you just slide the parts back in. It's easier to do when you're directly looking at it. And you just clean the internals, oil it, and then when you go to put it back together, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to line that pin up with this hole and drop it into place, and then pull the bolt, slide, whatever you want to call it, back and lock it in place. You also have to make sure that the recoil spring, let me turn this around, that the recoil spring is on this little protrusion here, like that. It needs to be captured like that. So make sure that you're not pinching the recoil spring or another other way pinning it. And then you bring this back, get that pin to drop down into that hole, and now your bolt's back in place. Getting this back on there is a little bit easier. Now in this case, what it did when I did that is it flipped forward. So I may need to pull it back out a little bit to push this down, make sure that this is down in the right place. So let's see if I can do that with the bolt in place. No, I can't. So we'll go ahead and retract it, pull it back out, make sure this is back all the way, because there's a larger opening that you're wanting that pin to drop into. Push the pin forward a little bit. There it goes. So now I have it properly assembled, and now all I need to do is push this forward. That's actually a little bit easier. Just set it on something and give it a push. And now you'll see that the larger opening is forward and the pin is captured in the smaller opening. That one piece is probably the most difficult part of the assembly reassembly or disassembly reassembly of this thing. If it weren't for that, it could almost be toolless or done with just the cleaning tools that you would normally have on hand for cleaning any kind of a gun. That one little piece is just kind of a hassle. So putting this thing together is fairly easy from this step forward. Take this little clip, the barrel retaining clip, it just slides right into place. Grab the stock. Now, one of the things right here at the back, you'll see there's a little lip, and on the back of this, you'll see there's kind of a little protrusion, and there's a cutout right here. Those are all going to be relevant as we do this. So you need to make sure that this fits down into here as you rock this into place. So you're going to kind of bring it in at an angle, slide it in, make sure that it lines up, and then drop it down into place. So now the receiver is inside the frame, and now we're going to put the dust cover on. And this is lip at the back of the dust cover right there. That goes up in here. Again, you bring it in at an angle and you slide the dust cover in, push it back if you need to, and now the dust cover is on. At this point you can put the pins back in. Do the rear pin. When you push the pin through, you have to put some tension on it. You see how it's spring loaded, and then use that same pick you used before to lock these in place, and they can be difficult. There it goes. So that one clipped, and then we'll do the front pin. Just drop it into the hole. One good thing is everything does seem to align easily, and then lock that in place. So now I have everything reassembled except the front cover. So I'm going to go get that front cover, and that just kind of slides into place, and you'll see that there's a little washer right here. You want to make sure that goes up and up above the ramp, and it just slides in, and then you flip this down. So now I do have a mostly reassembled Hi-Point. The last thing to do is put the charging handle in. Now the charging handle you can put on either side. Notice there's a threading there. I've chosen to put it on the left side. That's where I want to have it. So you drop it into the hole, and this is important. This isn't hardened tool steel. You don't want to strip the threads, so you want to rock it a little bit as you're tightening it. And right now it's going in with by hand. It should snug down by hand. If you need a wrench at this point, you're doing it wrong. Then I'm going to take this wrench, and I'm just going to take 2 fingers on the wrench and just give it a little tug. I'm just trying to tighten it down enough that it doesn't rattle out. But I'm not going to get in there and start laying some serious torque on it. I don't want to strip those threads out. At this point, I now have a fully operational, ready to go Hi-Point carbine. So I'm going to cut in and show you something that I forgot during the assembly, and this is one of the reasons I don't like clips and various things like that. I forgot to put this clip in. And this goes in like this and just pushes forward and locks in place. And that's what holds the receiver assembly into the frame. So make sure you get all the clips and parts on, and that you don't lose any of the clips and parts when you put this thing back together. Overall, you want to talk about bang for the buck. At the price that you pay for these, the functionality you get, temporarily setting aside the takedown procedure, they're excellent firearms. They do work. They're easy to shoot well. They're fun to shoot. And, 10 millimeter in a carbine for under $300, for actually around $300, is pretty amazing. I looked at some other 10 millimeter carbines. There's not much out there in the field. The lowest I could find was in the $600 territory, and it wasn't getting good reviews. And then I saw them up over 1,000. So really, the price really is right for what you're getting here. Last thing I'll talk about before I wrap up is the trigger. The trigger is actually decent. It comes in around 9 pounds. And there's the take-up, which is minimal. A little bit of creep, actually a decent amount of creep, and then a break all the way at the back. Do that again. A little bit of creep and a break. There's the reset, which is basically all the way out. It didn't reset properly that time. It may have been because of the way I cycled it. So overall, it's not a stellar trigger, but it's not a bad trigger either. And with the weight of it and having it tucked into your shoulder, I didn't have any hard time staying on target as I was pulling the trigger. So, you know, if you're used to a fine trigger on a high-end rifle, it may not be what you're looking for, but it's definitely a decent trigger. The other thing too is everything on this is polymer as far as the frame. The grip is not slippery. It's got a bit of a texture to it. The trigger is actually polymer as well. So there are some compromises you're taking for the $300 territory versus $700 plus. And the thumb safety is actually a metal bar, and it operates pretty smoothly. You can kind of have a hard time thumbing it up just because of the angle, but thumbing it down is easy. Magazine release worked well, worked smooth. So you know, all the controls, what few controls there really need to be, are there and easy to operate. So overall, looking for a carbine, 10mm carbine, a fun range gun, check this thing out. Other than that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell if you do. Please check us out on Facebook and Patreon, and have a great day. Thank you.